Jerry, are you ready?
I'm ready, Casey. Can you hear me pretty good?
I can. I am going to go ahead and jump in. We've got people signing in kind of all over the place here, but for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Thank you to everybody for being on the call today. We are incredibly excited to do part 2 of our Coaching Boys into Men webinar series. As many of you know, I've talked with most of you personally. We are the Tennessee Coalition to end domestic and sexual violence, and our goal and mission is basically to end domestic and sexual violence in the state of Tennessee. And we do that in 3 main ways. We do it through public policy, training, and legal advocacy, just to keep it short and sweet. And part of my work since I started at the Coalition has been to figure out how we can do a better job supporting our colleges and universities across the state. And I've dubbed it the Campus Prevention Project. And so back in January, as part of this effort, we worked with Tennessee Tech University to host kind of Coaching Boys into Men Part 1. Jerry led that webinar as well. He gave a lot of background information on the program, a lot of data on the program, and a lot of kind of that basic information. And so today is the part 2, where he's going to spend more time talking about how you actually implement the program. He's going to give some basic information, but what we're really going to use today is to dig into the skills of how to use the Coaching the Boys into Men tool. So if you need a recording of the first webinar, I'd be happy to get that for you. Just let me know. I am very excited to say that we have, as of right now, we had 8 schools registered for the webinar this morning. We have a large contingency from Lipscomb University, also a large group from Tennessee State. I know we've got, in terms of community colleges out there, we have Jackson State, Walter State, and Volunteer State on the line, and Tennessee Wesleyan and Bethel University also. So we're very excited to have such a diverse group of schools. There were some of you that registered with your personal email, so I wasn't sure what school or program you were affiliated with. So I'd actually like to just ask everyone really quick to type into the chat box what school or program that you are representing today. So if you can just take a moment to do that, I would really appreciate it. And I'll give you just a second.
Casey, I'm not sure. Did I miss you mention? I thought you put the first webinar on YouTube. I'm sure you did. Did you mention that?
I did, but it's private, so I have to send them a link. So I can, yeah, I can send the link.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I had a hard time searching for it on YouTube, but I'd always go back to the link in your email. Okay, makes sense.
Yes, that's because I am sneaky and I made it private, so people can only get the link if I send it to them.
Okay, I get it. Thanks.
All right, so I'm getting some answers here. If everybody will just take another moment, I want to make sure if we've got any other schools out there. Yeah, so I see Tennessee Tech. We're glad you guys are on. Tennessee State. Thank you for being here. I know you guys had a big group. Lipscomb, big group. Thank you. Amy West from Jackson State. Lipscomb University, Tennessee Tech. Bethel, welcome to you guys, and Volunteer State, TSU, great. So I think we've got everybody that registered. So again, we're really glad that you're here. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jerry McMeekin, who is the Coaching Boys into Men educator from Pittsburgh Action Against Rape. And we have been doing a lot of work trying to help bring the Coaching Boys into Men model to Tennessee. So we are grateful for his help and his expertise. And everybody should be able to see his screen at this point. And so, Jerry, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Casey. Thank you very much for putting this together. Thanks to the Tennessee Coalition. And also, it's really exciting to hear everybody that's on the line today. So thank you all for joining. I just put that slide, so hopefully everybody is seeing my slide. And we have a couple of videos that I'll show, and hopefully you'll be able to pick up the audio. Nothing too long, just like maybe 2 one-minute videos in the future here. But I just wanted to put that up there. I'm assuming, a majority of you we're on the first webinar, and I know there are some newcomers as well. So I just kind of wanted to reintroduce myself. Up on the screen right now is just a background. I always like to introduce myself to the audience and let them know both my educational background and my athletic background. You can see up there, you know, I earned a master's degree in athletic administration from University of California University, or Cal U of Pennsylvania, I'm sorry. And I really just want to mention my athletics background. You know, I played high school basketball and collegiate basketball. My collegiate basketball, I played my eligibility out at the University of Pittsburgh at Greensburg, a satellite campus. It was Division III basketball. We played in the American Mountain Collegiate Conference. And I just like to make sure that you all know that, because it's totally relevant to why I do what I do today in coaching boys into men in this program that I kind of have a couple of different responsibilities with. You know, I recruit coaches of male athletes, so I recruit athletic programs at both the high school and collegiate level. Once I make those relationships and I forge those relationships with those schools and those coaches and those athletic administrators, I then train coaches, essentially what's going on today with this second webinar. And then in addition, and what you're going to hear a lot today will be about my experience as an implementer of this program, because I also coach a high school basketball team here in the city of Pittsburgh. My high school is called Shaler Area High School. It's one of the larger high schools as far as the entire district and the community is concerned. We participate in the WPIAL, which is the Western Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletics League. That's our governing body. That's our athletics governing body. And we participate in the largest group of schools. We're in Quad A, so we play the bigger schools. And that's based off of student enrollment, obviously, how many boys are in your school, in your high school. So that's a little bit about my background. Again, I'm going to talk a lot about this past year. So I've been doing this now for almost 2 years, kind of promoting the program, coaching boys into men, and training coaches as well. But this past season, I was able to implement the program with my school, and so a lot of this will be, referencing my experiences and what I've learned through implementing this program. I think it added a notch onto my belt, and I'm able to promote this a little bit stronger. I'm a little bit more passionate about it, going through the experience myself and having that experience, this 12-week experience of kind of implementing the program. I mean, I'll talk more about that. So moving on, just a little bit about my agency, Pittsburgh Action Against Rape, PAR. We offer counseling services, crisis intervention services. So we have medical advocates and legal advocates that actually work with the victims. I don't work with the victims. I'm on the prevention and education or prevention and outreach team. And so I go out and I educate. I educate male athletes and coaches. So that's my responsibility. But we're the largest rape crisis center in Allegheny County, and we're situated in the community called the South Side, which is pretty close to Heinz Field, and where the Steelers play, and where the Pittsburgh Steelers play, and PNC Park, where the Pittsburgh Pirates play, really close to the Consol Energy Center, where the Pittsburgh Penguins play. I'm just trying to give you an idea where we're situated here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I like to set up all my presentations. Typically, I can see my audience, and so I like to let them know where we're headed. So I'm going to do the same with everybody online today. It's kind of broken up into 4 parts. We're going to talk a little bit about why our coaches, specifically men, reluctant to talk about the prevention of sexual violence. And I'll have a good conversation about that. I will reintroduce Coaching Boys into Men for the newcomers, for people that aren't so familiar, but it's not going to be as detailed. And like Casey said, you can gain access to the first webinar if you want more detailed information on the program. And there's also, you can go on Futures Without Violence, who's the creator of this program, and you can coachescorner.org to get more information about the program. I'll reveal some tips and obstacles to implementing Coaching Boys into Men. Again, a lot of this information is based off of my own experience of implementing with my high school basketball team this past season. And then lastly, I'll review the Coaching Boys into Men college cards with you guys today, and we'll talk about some of my experiences and some of the conversations that took place with my team specifically. So I'm going to move on. I just want to ask Casey, are you hearing me okay and seeing everything okay?
Yes. I think we are good.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So I'm going to put everybody into this imaginary room since, we're not together. We're going to pretend like we're together. And I want to talk about how we all ended up in this little room, this imaginary room, or online together. I want to talk about who's present in this room today. Again, this is an imaginary room. I know we're all out there, state to state, Tennessee to Pennsylvania connection. But I know we're all here because, or for different reasons. Some of us are here because we're coaches and we care about our athletes and their futures. Some of us might be here because, we're fathers and we want our kids to grow up and not be hurt or not hurt anyone else because we care about our children. I know some of us might be here because we don't want the women we care about to be hurt. And some of us don't want the men that we care about to hurt women. Some of us are here because sexual violence has already impacted someone we know. Some of us are here because we were told to be here. Some of us are online because, it might help our teams. So from whatever vantage point you've entered this imaginary room or logged on today, I want to ask you to set aside judgment on coaching boys into men and me and our time together today. In good faith, to you setting aside judgment, I want all of us to set aside personal judgment. I've done things I wouldn't do again. I've done things I may consider a mistake or even problematic. But today is about applying your life experiences in a helpful and meaningful way for the benefit of the young men in your life whom you care about most and who you coach today. So, and it kind of leads into the elephant in the room a little bit. This training is not about making you a victim advocate. It's not about making you a therapist. It's not about forfeiting wins or losses or destroying teamwork. But in fact, I believe today enhances all of that. And I have the experience firsthand with my team, like I said, that I'll be sharing throughout this entire presentation. It's also not about blame or judgment. Yes, holding people accountable is important in all facets of life, but today's training is about how to promote positive bystander interventions, promote healthy relationships for young men, and prevent sexual and intimate partner violence. So we all belong here in this imaginary room, and although we all have different backgrounds, experiences, and reasons for being here, we all do belong here. So when introducing or training coaches to implement coaching boys into men, these are some of the upfront hesitations expressed to me. Coaches feel uninformed about sexual violence in general. Some coaches don't feel comfortable with the laws surrounding this topic or just the prevalence of this topic. And guess what? That's perfectly okay. You don't have to be an expert. That's not what implementing coaching boys into men is all about. So I'm kind of going to, through this slide, reassure you guys out there that this is something that we can manage, that talking about these things with our athletes, with our students, is possible, and we don't need to be experts to do these things. This is already stuff coaches know. This is already stuff coaches address, and this is already stuff coaches care about when it comes to their own children and when it comes to their student athletes that they're responsible for. I want you guys to think about what you teach your kids and your athletes on a daily basis. And, like I've mentioned, I'm a coach. I know coaches don't want to be caught, not knowing something in front of their teams. Coaches don't like the players not knowing or knowing that they may not know something. Coaches like and need a lot of control. So talking about all this stuff that coaching boys into men addresses is kind of an atypical situation for a coach, and in the mind of a coach, it kind of threatens or fractures it threatens to fracture that coaches knows everything persona, but it doesn't have to. From my standpoint, my advice is you just have to be confident. Coaches are everything else, the coaches are confident in everything else when they approach the game that they coach, whether it's game management, daily practice planning, winning streak, losing streaks, injuries, grades. These are all things you have to deal with on a daily basis and, most of the time on the fly. So we're forced to make decisions and display confidence. I think that's key. Coaches learn to adapt quickly, and so I want you to use that approach when you're implementing coaching boys and some men. Remember, you know more than the athlete, and that when you kind of have that mindset, it gives off that professional edge that you need when you're implementing this program with your athletes, and simultaneously, it gives your athletes the confidence they need to share and to feel safe in this element when you're holding these conversations with these guys. I'm confident that coaches are already doing this, so it's nothing terribly different. So that's kind of like the lack of expertise, addressing that stuff. You don't have to be an expert, and you also have Casey, in the state from the Tennessee Coalition, there at your fingertips as a resource if you do feel uncomfortable, or if there's some help that you need when you're implementing this program, as well as myself, and you'll have my information again at the end of this presentation. But some more advice, balancing coaching boys and the men, with your program, I would recommend, preparing ahead of time when you're going to be implementing this program. I used a lot of current events. There's a ton of stuff in the news on a daily basis tied in with athletics and domestic violence and sexual assault and what's going on in high schools and college campuses and the federal government. There's always print on a daily basis that you can use when you're about to have one of these conversations with your team. There's also tons of videos. I'm going to show you a video today that you can relate. I use videos off of YouTube all the time. People send me different things, and I can send them to you, and Casey can send them to you as well. That's what I'm talking about as far as keeping that relationship going between, your coalition or your agency that you're working with while you're implementing the program. But, reviewing and knowing the material, having an idea of the way you want your discussions to go when you're implementing this program is key. Now, you can't predict how every conversation will go, but you can plan ahead, and it's like anything else. You get what you put into it. It's just like a lesson plan when you're a teacher. You get what you plan for. Moving on to that third bullet, kind of defensiveness, some coaches have expressed to me, different emotions about all of this. Some feel defensive, like this program is singling out men, pointing the finger at all males and male student athletes, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I'm a former high school and collegiate athlete, like I mentioned earlier, so I'm very loyal when it comes to student athletes, and that's exactly why I'm talking to you, all of you today about this topic in this program. This is my opportunity to give back to athletes. I'm trying to educate them and protect them all at the same time. This is an opportunity for all of us as coaches to provide our athletes with some additional character building skills and tools as they move on in life. And most importantly, we need men, and we need men as leaders if we're going to end violence against women. I'm not, PAR is not my agency, the Tennessee Coalition is not, and this program, Coaching Boys and Some Men, is not blaming men. We are not blaming men. We are recruiting men, and we need men. And we need coaches to help, end this ongoing epidemic. Lastly, the "you are not perfect" bullet point. This is a very important factor to consider when implementing Coaching Boys and Some Men. You are not perfect. I'm not perfect. We are not perfect. We men, coaches of male athletes, have to be able to admit and cope with that fact that we, and cope with the fact that we probably disrespected a female at some point in our lives. We have to be able to admit it. I had a very important moment actually happen for me, both professionally and personally, when I was working down in Jackson, Tennessee last month, when I hosted a presentation in Jackson, Tennessee. I was part of a large community roundtable discussion while I was down there, and a question was posed, why are men reluctant to participate in discussions around violence against women? And present in the crowd that there were about, I'd say about 40 different people, and I'd say there were a handful of men. And one of the men was the chief of police of Jackson, Tennessee. And he answered the question. He stood up and answered the question, and he said he thought it was because, men don't participate in these conversations or are hesitant to participate in these conversations because all men have offended a woman in some way, and they have a hard time admitting it. And that was really a monumental moment for me. You know, he continued and he said, no, not all men have raped or sexually assaulted a female, but, and then he said, I included, and he raised his hand, I think all men have disrespected a woman in some capacity. So, you know, that was a huge moment for me, and it's actually why I have, you know, started to commit time talking about all this up front in my presentations now. In my opinion, being able to admit it and giving real life advice about these types of incidents will help you and your team tremendously during the implementation process. I remember the exact moment with my team when I had to address this issue. And I told them, sure, you know, I'm not proud of all the decisions I've made in my life, and I wish there were some things I could redo, but I'm a human being and I've made mistakes. I'll actually elaborate a little further about that moment with my team on the next slide. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But the point I'm trying to make is that whatever the lens is, this is an opportunity for change, an opportunity to, you know, educate young males and help stop men from violating women, from the littlest forms of disrespect to the most violent forms of violence against women. You know, our young men see these mistakes portrayed in the media, and they see it happening right in their school buildings. As coaches, you know, we can't change the past, but can change the future and the future responses of our children and our student athletes. I want to move on. And actually, speaking about not perfect, here's a guy who's not perfect at all. You know, this is Mark McGuire, and I kind of want to drive that last point home from the last slide about not being perfect and how it relates to the perception of the problem of sexual assault. You know, human beings have an amazing power to explain and rationalize our behaviors. We could say, you know, there are things we should and there are things we should not do based upon the perception of reality or our perceived norms. You know, however, humans are so often wrong, and sometimes we have a misperception of the norm. I had a misperception about what I was supposed to be doing as a collegiate student athlete. You know, I participated in locker room banter. I probably talked about a female in the locker room without her knowing, you know, and I'm not proud of it, but I thought that was what I was supposed to be doing with my teammates. No one policed it, and it was easier to fit in that way. So looking back, I'm not proud of those moments, and I want to make a difference. As, you know, for Mark McGuire, ask Mark McGuire if he's proud of his choices to use steroids. I'm positive the answer is going to come out no. However, are you aware of his current position in the Major League Baseball? He's actually a hitting coach for the Los Angeles Dodgers. He still has a lot to offer his athletes as far as hitting instruction, power, experience, you know, and the list can go on and on as far as, you know, his hitting advice. He uses this opportunity, which is kind of his second chance, to influence the athletes he's responsible for in a positive manner now. This is how I now perceive my opportunity for working with high school and collegiate male athletes. When I was a player, I didn't have a coach standing up, you know, and this is kind of what I tell my guys when they ask me that question. Hey, coach, you know, you say you never did any of this, or you say you never made a mistake with a woman. You know, I didn't have a coach standing up in front of me in the locker room telling me it was wrong to talk about women the way we did in the locker room. None of my coaches talked to me about how I could handle that type of peer pressure. None of my coaches gave me advice or tools on how to stop my teammates from behaving this way. But that is not what I'm doing, and that's what I'm doing with my athletes through the implementation of coaching boys into men. I want to move on a little bit and actually talk about one of my coaches. Actually, both of these gentlemen in the middle were my coaches, Bill Shea and Frank Holleran. You know, the only norm that matters is that, you know, the care we all share for our athletes and kids, and a desire to use coaching as a, you know, teaching tool and a way to teach about life and bring out the best in your athletes and your young men. That's what both of these gentlemen in the middle, Bill Shea and Frank Holleran, are all about. Between the two of these men, you know, they've recorded over 1,000 wins. They have 2 national championship appearances at the junior college basketball level, and 1 national championship title as well between them. But to them, it's more than just the wins. It's more about influencing men they're responsible for in the right direction. No, they didn't stand up and deliver CBIM to us, but they did deliver tons of positive messaging about being a good son, about being a good student, and about being a good human being. They influenced me, and now through CBIM, through Coaching Boys and the Men, I found my message. I've found a tool that will help me teach and influence my young, impressionable male student athletes. I also wanted to show this photo again to make the point about how important the relationship between a player and a coach can really be. For me, it was everything. I talked to all these men in the picture on a regular basis, and both of those men in the middle only coached me for 2 years. That was at the junior college level, Community College of Allegheny County, which actually is right next door to Heinz Field where the Pittsburgh Steelers play. Reflecting back, these were some of my favorite moments as a young man. Other than my father, they were the greatest influences on my life, and a big reason why I was able to graduate college and obtain a master's degree, and why I'm sitting here today talking to you folks. So I'm going to transition actually into Coaching Boys and Men. I want to revisit the program for a second, take a little quick refresher. Again, you can read it there. It inspires coaches to want to talk and teach their male athletes about respecting themselves, others, and most importantly, women and girls. So,
hey, Jerry.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure people know that if they do have questions as you're going, I know you're going to give a few moments where you actually ask them if they have questions, but also if you have questions as we're going, you can type them into the question box, and I'll make sure that he gets them. So just FYI.
Yeah, and you guys, you could be thinking about that right now. What I'll do, I have maybe 3 or 4 slides attributed to this refresher of what the program is about, and then I'll give you an opportunity before I move on to pose any questions if anything needs answered or anything like that. When I'm doing my pitch or my sell to athletic administrators or coaches, when I'm recruiting allies and potential partners that will be implementing this program, one of the frequently asked questions is, why can't you do this with our players? And again, I did that whole importance piece on my coach and how influential my coaches have been on me, and how this program has been developed around that very unique relationship between player and coach. And also to add, my goal is to educate as many male student athletes as I possibly can here in the area, nationally, as a matter of fact, but locally as well. And how can we do that? Well, if I came in and did that, let's just say with one school district, I'd be at capacity with just one school district. Hey, we're going to bring you in every Monday for football, every Tuesday for basketball, and I couldn't possibly educate, let's say, all the male athletes in the WPIAL, in the Western Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletics League. So all the high school male athletes here in the city of Pittsburgh, in the surrounding areas that participate in the WPIAL, that's my goal, to educate all of them. Well, how do we do that? I can't do that on my own. And so this program has been designed to train the coaches and then have the coaches address the players. So that's why it's so important, just to get out in front of that. And then this is the kit. This is what you're kind of given when you're implementing. Each coach receives one of these. And this is the meat and potatoes, the card series right here. That's kind of what I'll show to you in a couple of visuals that I have on some other slides coming up. But this is what you use to implement the program with your team. That's the card series. You also have the playbook right here. This is for the coach that's implementing the program. It took me 15 minutes to read through. It's a really easy read, and it's more just in preparation of implementing the program. It kind of gets your mind set on what you're out to accomplish. It gives you some, suggestions and some tips about teachable moments and about the discussions that you're going to be having. And then the same thing in the back, the reference packets, the resource packets are just more for the coach as they work to prepare for implementation. Now, the program itself, I'll talk about the way we implement it at the high school. So there's 2 different ways. We have the high school version and we have the collegiate version. Futures Without Violence kind of created the high school model, and the way the high school model works, as you can see right there, that's me, and I have the cards in my hand right there. We're on one discussion for the week. So we do one discussion a week, and it takes just 15 minutes a week of your time. It doesn't interfere with practice time. It doesn't interfere with playing time. We just have one conversation a week, 15 to 20-minute conversation. We coined our conversations Coaching Boys into Men Mondays. So most of our conversations happened. This is actually right. This is the film room at Shaler Area High School. We couldn't get into the locker room because, there were other winter sports going on, and we wanted to create a safe place for the guys. So we didn't want guys walking in and out from other sport teams. We wanted these guys to feel comfortable, so we got the film room right next door. And so the guys knew every Monday. We started practice at 3 o'clock. The dismissal bell rings at 2:30. They had 15 minutes to get into the film room on Mondays. 2:45, Coaching Boys in the Men Mondays in the film room right next to the locker room. And we were up on the court by 3 o'clock most days. Of course, there were a couple of conversations that you just didn't want to cut off, or there were a couple of conversations that really went well, where, we might have, interfered with practice for about 5 to 10 minutes, but I mean, what's really important here? I'm not going to cut off a conversation if it's going really well and guys are asking good questions or we're getting good responses. And that's the head coach back there, and he was all aboard. He was all for it. That's another, important piece to note. Of course, yes, I implemented the program because I also work for this agency, and, I needed that experience, and I asked, and we made that, we made that arrangement. But, get your other coaches involved. Get your assistant coaches involved. Yes, maybe the head coach does a card, then the assistant coach does a card. We worked with a football program, Robert Morris University, which I'll talk to you in a little bit about. That was our biggest roster that we worked with. That's 100, college male athletes on the roster. And so, we also suggest breaking the groups down. So what we did there when we strategized with the coaching staff was each one of those coaches, they have about 10 employed coaches, and we broke up the groups per position because there's a position coach for each position in football, whether it was the offensive line coach, the defensive line coach, the quarterbacks coach, the special teams coach, the head coach, the head assistant. Everybody took a group, and they actually did it during their training camp, and they all implemented the program at the same time with their positioned players. So it broke down the groups. It wasn't just the head coach trying to have a conversation with all 100 of his student athletes. No, each position coach had about 10 to 12 guys they were responsible for, and they conducted these meetings with them that way. And they did it a little different. So PAR noticed that there was a need for a college version, that some of the high school material that I used with my guys, there was some more conversation needed around these adaptations that we made, the increased level of maturity when you're moving on into you're on your own in college. So we included some of that conversation in the cards. Alcohol education, so talk around alcohol and the consumption of alcohol and all those responsibility with alcohol. There's that conversation in the college cards. And then your need for bystander intervention, just more conversation around that because of the situations and the scenarios of being on your own and being at college parties and being at bars and different things like that. So that conversation takes place. And my agency kind of made those adaptations and had those cards printed in collaboration with and the support from Futures Without Violence. And then our suggestion for colleges is to kind of, again, there are many different levels of collegiate athletics. Again, I mentioned I played at JUCO level, where you only get 2 years of eligibility, your freshman and sophomore year. And then I played at the Division III level, my last 2 years of eligibility. And there are no scholarships. So then you got to start thinking about, what does that mean? Well, typically a lot of coaches, maybe at the JUCO level or at the Division III level, that might not be their only job. They might not be fully employed by the college campus. It depends on each campus. And maybe some of those coaches teach classes. Then you move up into the Division II ranks and the Division I ranks, and you're talking about coaches that this is their livelihood. This is all that they do. They recruit. They have to, year in and year out recruit players for their, program. They have to go out and look at other teams and scout different teams and things like that. So, what we recommend is that you do it during the off season with colleges, and that it looks like a 4-session, 1 hour a week, 3 cards in each session. So you're sitting down in this element here, and you're talking to your players once a week for 4 weeks during the off season if you're a college coach. Again, I recognize that there are many different ways of implementing this program, and as far as everybody on the line today, that'll be kind of your job in collaboration with the Tennessee Coalition and Casey, strategizing and talking about how does this implementation process look for my school, my athletics program, and my college coaches. So that's another conversation. But again, I recognize that looks differently for each educational institution, each athletic program, for each sport. I'm going to take another quick break, another quick drink of water. So this is Bill Denniston. Go ahead.
I was just going to say really quick, while you do that, I think that's one of the things that I've talked about, Jerry, is that I really appreciate the flexibility of the program of coaching boys into men, and the fact that there aren't any specific ways that it has to be implemented in terms of time and the way that it's laid out. So I think that's just something I want to reiterate, is that people can do it however works for them.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. And that's a perfect segue to kind of where we started here at PAR, and when we really noticed that there was a need for a college version of this program. Robert Morris University is Division I athletics program. Robert Morris University, a college which is situated about 30 minutes west of where I'm at right now. It's still in the same county, Allegheny County, in the state of Pennsylvania here. And we've had an existing relationship with them. We've done work on their campus, and then Coaching Boys and the Men came about, and we started to have conversations with the athletic director and the assistant athletic director and the Title IX coordinator and the vice president of student affairs, and we came up with a strategy where they wanted to pilot the program with the soccer team 2 seasons ago. And so what we, again, designed was a 1-month commitment during the off season with the Robert Morris soccer team, and this is Bill Denniston, the head coach, and he hosted, 4 one-hour sessions in a 1-month time span, and he addressed 3 of those cards. He just put 3 of those cards in that 1-hour session each week, sort of like an opportunity here to kind of, I was a college athlete, so I knew what we did during the off season. We had study halls still, and we had check-ins, so that the coach knew what we were doing. He stayed in touch, and he stayed in tune. He's still responsible for it. He's essentially your father on campus, during the academic school year. And so this is just another opportunity to kind of take advantage of those study halls or take advantage of those check-ins and invite your guys in during the off-season and know what they're doing, and also influence them in a positive way because you're having these conversations with those guys. And so, and then the other thing, as I mentioned here, is that, we do a pre and a post test to kind of see with the college athletes to kind of see where they were before the program was implemented, and then they receive the identical post test, and we kind of see what kind of influences that this program and these conversations have on the guys. So all of this talk about coaches being hesitant and some of the barriers of the program, and all this different stuff. And then I want to bring in our work with Robert Morris and the soccer team and Bill Denniston and all that stuff. We did this PSA, this public service announcement through PAR, and I'm kind of just going to show you, because I showed this video in my first webinar, so it's about a 4-minute video. You can actually access it on our homepage, on PAR's homepage, to watch the whole video. But I just want to show you again Bill Denniston's comments from this video, and then we'll move on from there. I just have to get it to where it starts.
My name is these guys. Schools, they need to be the guys that are getting this information, hopefully passing along to their peers.
I had some reservations when I started. I think that most of it was just I didn't feel like an expert in the field. And once I met with the guys from PAR, I realized that I really didn't have to be, and they set up the program by introducing us to the topic. And then I realized I think it's going to be okay. I think I can do this. I tried to make it a little bit light and a little bit personal. I have 3 daughters, age 22, and twins that are 19. So obviously there's the personal side of it. And at times I tried to make it light. I think that made it go well. The players took to it as I expected. A little hesitation in the beginning. It's a little bit uncomfortable to talk about. But once the discussion started, I think they warmed up to it, and I think a lot was learned. And it's like anything, just education. I think guys were aware of it, but now they're more aware of it, and I believe that whatever the situation, they'd be more likely to act upon it.
So you heard it there. He mentions hesitation up front, but it's really about getting the ball rolling. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I learned through my own experience. I've learned through talking with all these coaches that I'm responsible for training and getting them through the program, all the relationships that we've built here through coaching boys into men. The feedback is pretty consistent. First off, once you get the ball rolling, you kind of fall into your own, and you find out how your team works and how who are the lead contributors, who are the guys that are going to talk, and how do you get your guys to talk and things like that. But the consistency from the guys is, this is an opportunity they never were given before, and they don't mind talking about this stuff. And I'll be the first one to say, I found that out firsthand through my experience. So I think this is a good point to kind of take a quick break and see how you want to handle any questions, Casey, if you can chime in here.
Sure. I did have one person that that chimed in and just asked if you could be a little closer to your speaker or your microphone, sorry, just to make sure that everybody can hear really well. Otherwise, does anybody have any questions they want to type in at this time? I'll give it just a second.
Yeah, that would probably be my suggestion. If anybody has a question, just type it in, and I'll give another break again, and then you can let me know what it was, Casey.
I did have somebody with their hand raised.
Oh.
Let me see here. I'm going to unmute that person and see if they'd like to ask a question. I believe that's Parrish McGrath. Okay. I think we're good.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and move on.
If anything pops up, I'll let you know.
Okay. So again, how do you become comfortable in front of your athletes when implementing CBIM? So a lot of this information from this point of the presentation till the end will be about what I've learned through my experience of implementing coaching boys into men with my basketball team. So, and it's worth mentioning, during the course of my implementation process, I work closely with an evaluator, a personal evaluator out of Ohio, Sharon Wasco, and we talked every Thursday because I told you I implemented coaching boys into men on Mondays, and then every Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., we had a conversation about that card, about that experience, and she documented it, she recorded it, and I was able to go back and listen to those conversations and look at, some of the consistencies and some of the things she thought were interesting. But the conversations always went, what card did you implement? Name the card. What was the topic's name? How long did it take? What were some of the comments that stood out? Were there any obstacles? Were there any questions that didn't work? So we always talked about that difference, and it was pretty much the same format for every conversation that lasted about an hour. Essentially, she was like my therapist because I got to vent to her, once every Thursday. And so I learned a lot through that experience as well, being able to reevaluate and reassess what was going on and talk about the things that worked and the things that didn't. So that's kind of how I formulated the rest of my presentation through all of that. So I just wanted you to know that was going on.
We did have a question.
And actually,
we did have a question from Jerry. Somebody asked what the ideal size is for a group. So you may be on your way to answering that, but just so you know, that one came up.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And again, it's going to be, based on each individual sport team and the size of the roster. But recommendation, I would suggest, in that picture there, you saw probably about 20 guys. I say no more than 25. If you have more than 25, then start thinking about how you can divide the groups and make them smaller groups, just because, it's like any other group. You're going to get your guys that are going to be, your consistent contributors, and then you're going to get your guys that are going to be able to hide from it because there are bigger numbers in the group. So if you can, and there are different ways also. Use your teaching backgrounds and your coaching backgrounds to kind of encourage participation. Sometimes I would have them collaborate in small groups. If we had 25 guys, I was part of a soccer team, a collegiate soccer team, and I watched one of the coaches actually pose the question, divide his groups into 5 groups. So they had like 7 guys in each group, 5 different groups, and he would say, all right, here's the question. What do you guys think? Talk amongst yourselves, and then I'm going to have you report back. And he did one of the sessions that way, and I thought it was pretty interesting. Is that the way you should do it? Maybe, maybe not. And it wasn't the way he did it every time, but he wanted to try something different. He brought his teaching expertise into the mix, and that's the way. So, again, I'd say no greater than 25. That would be my recommendation. If you can get it down to 10 to 12, I think that'd be awesome. But everybody's different. So, again, how do we become comfortable in front of our athletes when we're implementing this information? My recommendation is be yourself. Put a little effort into preparing and be comfortable with being a little uncomfortable. And remember, your guys are always benefiting from these conversations. That was one of the quotes I'll never forget when I hosted one of the post surveys. I think it was with actually the Robert Morris men's soccer team. I asked the guys, I said, do you think all these guys, all the male athletes on Robert Morris's campus should be educated through Coaching Boys and the Men? And the kid was like, absolutely. He said, there's going to be guys that don't contribute, but even those guys are part of this conversation, and believe me, they're benefiting from it. And then one of the football guys, now that reminds me of something else, when I hosted the post survey with the football team, one of the guys stopped me on the way out of the door, and he was like, they call me coach. Some of them call me coach because they know my background, and they'll go, Coach, now when we see a drunk girl at a party or a bar, we say PAR. And so PAR is the acronym for my agency, PAAR, Pittsburgh Action Against Rape. So he's telling me that, now they're identifying a girl that might be drunk that, and they're telling their buddies, PAR, she's drunk, like stay away. Is that a breakthrough? Maybe, maybe not. But the fact that it's happening is encouraging. And then he stops the kid that's walking by me to kind of validate it, and I forget the kid's name, but he stops his teammate. And he goes, "Tell Coach what we do when we see a drunk girl at a party now." And the kid goes, "Oh, we say PAR." And so, it was just something cool, to see that it's happening. At least these guys are recognizing, and like we say, we want you guys to look out for each other as well. So standing up for each other a little bit. So a lot of this information I'm going to talk about, again, it has been gathered through my experience, and some of my specific conversations with my guys, I'm going to mention past this point. As I continue to push this program, I've found that talking about my specific experience has been extremely well received by whoever the audience may be at the time. And it's also integral in my attempt to recruit coaches and to comfort coaches about their potential participation with CBIM. It's worth mentioning, I did tell you about the evaluator. So I'm going to move on here, actually, and I want to start talking about my experience and how it can help your experiences. So the first thing that I did in that first session right there, well, that's actually not the first session, but in my first session, I wanted to set up a safe place for these guys. I wanted to make sure that they knew that, we're not recording any of this information. We're not reporting any of this information back to their parents or to administration. I wanted to kind of set the tone for them. But I did remind them, and I think this is important, we are mandated reporters. So I did remind them that if I did feel like their safety was in jeopardy, then I would have to report to the proper authority or whatever. And so I wanted to make sure they understood what that was and what a mandated reporter was. So I think that's important to let them know that is who you are, and that, if you feel for their safety, you may have to report. But for the most part, I just wanted them to know that we're not casting any judgment. I'm looking for guys to be honest and say what is on their mind and ask questions that come up. Whenever you feel free to intervene, feel free to interfere. I want you guys to just feel comfortable and talk. And I think it's important also to mention, be personable. I keep talking about that. Be relatable. Take your time and just let them know you're going to be honest as well. I think you're going to see a better reaction from your guys when they feel like they can trust you. And in my opinion, the only way they're going to trust you is if you're honest and relatable and personable. So I mentioned all this stuff about, current events. I had a whole big headline piece in my first webinar about, why is this program so important? Why are these conversations and talking about this with male athletes specifically? Why is all this important? Well, that's why. I mean, you got these current events every day, and our guys are seeing these too. Our young, impressionable male athletes are seeing these as well. These are guys that they look up to, the Ray Rices of the world, the Greg Odens of the world. And it's happening all over the place. The federal investigation on college campuses for the mishandling of sexual assaults all across our country. Obviously, the Vanderbilt rape trial. Time Magazine presented something. The NBA, the NFL, the NCAA, they're all being investigated, or all being, kind of microscoped right now as far as how all this ties in with sexual assault and domestic violence. So I used current events to my advantage. I always set up these conversations by talking specifically about each current event. What happened? A brief synopsis. So I asked the guys what they know about the story. And they like to talk, when they know about something. When they know what something is about, that's how you build momentum. Give them an opportunity to talk about something that they know first, and then go off of that. You just don't want to go in there and say, what do you do if you hear a guy bragging about a sexual conquest? No, you got to set it up for them. So, current events are nice. It sets it up, the conversation up real nice. It just takes a little bit of time. I mean, every day I load up the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette or ESPN.com, and you find something on there. The second piece I always like to talk about is, with these current events, is the impact on the victims. We talk about the victims. We're always talking about the alleged offender, let's talk about the victims and how this impacts their lives. And then we talk about the impact on those who took action, so bystanders. A big piece of this, obviously with the Vanderbilt case and with Steubenville is all about, cell phones. These guys built incriminating cases against themselves by the use of their own cell phones and technology. And so we had a lot of good conversations around that stuff. So it's worth mentioning, current events can be a good setup for these conversations. I'm going to take a quick drink. While talking about all the negative media exposure around athletes and students and high schools and colleges and sexual assault and domestic violence and all that stuff, here's an opportunity to spin it. Coaching Boys and the Men provides your team, your athletic program, and your educational institution an opportunity to make positive headlines. I mentioned this before in the first webinar as well. So this was a story done by the other paper in the city of Pittsburgh, the Tribune Review. They did a story about how my high school basketball team was taking on this program, and that's the headline down there. Coaches lead discussions to influence athletes' attitudes toward women avoiding violence. It was done by Adam Smeltz. And, I mean, this is a good way to kind of spin the negativity and build positivity in the community around all of this stuff. And actually, there is a card in the program that you're given, in the Coaching Boys and the Men program, and the card is in the middle of the actual lesson plans, in the middle of the actual cards that you're implementing with your team. It's called Halftime. Enlist your local sports reporter, and it gives you tips on how to build positive messaging in your community and around this program. So there's all kinds of stuff in there on how you can enlist a reporter and build this, positive headline and reflect positivity in your community and on your school. I want to talk a little bit about being natural versus sticking to the script of these cards, and I'll show you a card in a second. But the card is laid out for you, and you can work your way through and read through and post the questions that way. Keep it contained and on the point if you'd like. However, the more you can, in my opinion, the more you can bring yourself and your experiences and feeling, I think the bigger impact you'll have on your athletes, and the more I think they'll invest into the program and trust you and trust these conversations. So my recommendation is staying on the left side of this slide, being yourself, all the stuff we talked about, being relatable, lead through example, understanding that conversations may take twists and turns. They may go off script. What you thought this conversation, the way the conversation was headed, a kid may pose a question, and you may allow that question to be answered and the conversation to take a totally different turn. And that's okay. That's what this program is all about. allowing these guys to have an opportunity to vent, an opportunity to discuss, an opportunity to give good suggestions or gain good suggestions around these topics. However, I'm not saying you can't be, if you're one of those people that just like to be in total control and don't like silence. See, I'm the type of guy, I'll sit there and make you feel uncomfortable. If I'm feeling uncomfortable, I want you to feel uncomfortable. But there are people that, like to stick to the script, like to know what they're doing, and you can do this thing word for word, and it sort of provides comfort for the presenter. And it allows for little room for derailment. Guys can't take you off track and things like that. And here's what I'm talking about. Here's the cards in case you don't have them in front of you. But here, it looks wordy. But again, the way I suggest approaching these cards in the implementation process is this would be the front of the card. They're front and back, and this is the back of the card. We're going to look at all the cards here in a moment, but this is the first card of the curriculum, and this is the preseason speech. And here are your objectives. This training, this is essentially a lesson plan for a teacher that's going to teach a class. This training will help athletes understand their expectations and ground rules for the upcoming season. If you want to post it, you want to read it that way and flip it, hey, this card says that you guys are going to be able to understand the expectations and the ground rules for the upcoming season. You know what that looks like. And it's also going to talk to you about the CBIM program trainings and how it focuses on building healthy relationships and respect for women and girls. I want you guys to know the team and university alcohol policies, and I want you to understand how it can affect decision-making in college careers. College is an opportunity, not a right. That's how you can stick to the script if you'd like. Now, what I did was I looked at, okay, that's where this training's going today, and now I wrap my head around the way that I want the discussion to go. This is the way they want the discussion to go today. And then I look at this as the words, there should be a word in front of this, suggestive warm-up. To me, I never use these warm-ups. Again, I read the warm-ups prior to implementing the program, and I probably read the warm-up in this front of the card, again, each time, probably a half an hour before I implemented the program. And I just want to remind myself where I was going. Okay, and I looked at the warm-up that they gave me, and I said, oh, that might have rang a bell, or that might have, gave me a light bulb moment. I can remember an instance. I like to be relatable, so I use my experiences as a player and as a coach, and I could always find something that related to the topic. Or it made me think of a current event, and I used the current event as a warm-up. Or it made me think of a video like the one I showed you, and maybe I would implement, no, I didn't implement that one, but I had a Dave Chappelle video that was a consent clip, and it was an icebreaker clip, and it was a perfect segue and a warm-up for the conversation that day. So for me, this has always been about preparation on the front. However, again, you can read it word for word to your guys if you'd like, and it's still going to have some impact on the guys no matter what, versus not doing it at all. It's going to have an impact. But here's the meat and potatoes right here. This is the Ask the Players section right here. And all I would do is say, hey, so what does respect mean to you guys? How can you show respect to your mother? How do you show respect to your father? And kind of just went off script a little bit and stuck to the questions for the most part. And then down here, again, this is for you. Read it prior to, read it while they're answering. In case there is a little bit of silence, here you go. It gives you some discussion points and wrap up in case, you don't have any conversation going, which I would find hard to believe at this point. That's kind of what it looks like. We'll take more detailed looks at each card here in a moment. But again, I just want to talk to you about some of the opportunities that arise during the season as you're implementing the program. So some of the things to consider as you're delivering coaching boys and to men in season and off season. Some of the opportunities that arise. Winning matters. For me, it did. I found out, first off, my high school basketball team didn't win a lot of basketball games. We had a tough time. We're in a very tough section. We're, like I said, in the bigger sections, but we're one of the smaller schools when it comes to the bigger sections as far as, participation in boys enrolled in our school district. But, it did at times make delivering difficult. But what I did was we did go through a 5-game winning streak. And so when we went on a 5-game winning streak, I actually jumped. I kind of used that to my advantage. And because we fell a little bit behind, and I'll talk about that in a second, that 5-game winning streak stretched over a span of maybe 2 weeks because we played 2 games, a week. I pumped out 3 or 4 cards in that winning streak because morale was high. Team morale was high. The timing was right. We had unity there. guys were together, and so that there is something to that. If you're losing and you're not feeling like you can get these guys to really buy in right now, it makes it a little bit tough. But when we were winning, I used that to my advantage. Also, during the season, you'll notice, you can utilize special events to promote this program. You have homecomings or final home games. What we always had, like senior night, and we actually did that, and I'll talk a little bit about our senior night celebration and how we incorporated Coaching Boys into Men. In a second, I'll show you the visual. But you can always utilize these special events for positive promotion. And then we also actually partnered with a team that we were playing actually on senior night that had already sent their male athletes through the Coaching Boys into Men program. So that was great. Now, during the off season, some of the opportunities, it's no distraction. It doesn't interfere with the game schedule at all. Again, it doesn't interfere with game or practice schedule during the season if you don't allow it to. But again, there are things that knock you off your course a little bit, and so you have to figure out how that works, for each program. But again, it's one less burden during the season, during the regular season. If you do it during the off season, it gives you an opportunity, like I mentioned, to touch base with your team, sit down and have discussions. And also, there are, like with football and stuff like that, I mentioned that there are mini camps and training camps that are possibilities to implement during those times. So this was that moment I was talking about. This was senior night at our high school. Again, our futures had already been determined. This was going to be our last game. We weren't going to be invited to the playoffs because we didn't record enough victories to be invited. And so a light bulb actually went off in my head. If you can see, so we're playing Woodland Hills High School over here, the black jerseys. Shaler area, that's the white jerseys. And so I realized preparing for the last home game, that's a big day. That's when all the parents and all the families come out to recognize the seniors. That's when the community comes out. I actually run a little dribblers camp for the youth in our community. It's usually kindergarten through 4th grade. And so I have them come up at halftime of senior night, and they perform their little dribblers thing. And so all of the parents of all the little dribblers, of all the youth, are in the crowd. Now, you don't see a lot of crowd over here. We actually have bigger bleachers on the other side. That's the side that I'm facing. And it was packed. And so then I had a light bulb moment sitting here at my agency talking with my coworkers and talking about the pledge. And I'll talk about the pledge, which is the last card. That's card 12. And, there are different ways that you can do this. And so what I did is I had the Coaching Boys into Men pledge printed on a signature board, a pretty decent-sized signature board. And I had all of the athletes sign before the game started. And actually, the guys in the black jerseys, these were the guys actually, Woodland Hills, their coach implemented Coaching Boys into Men with them as well this season. And I actually helped train him as well. So all of these guys, it just happened to be a coincidence. It was senior night. Neither one of our two teams were going to the playoffs. So we had to look for something good and positive to promote. And this was a great opportunity. That's another thing that Coaching Boys into Men provides, is an opportunity to promote to the community some positivity. And then, elephant in the room. Okay, we have an all-black basketball team here, and we have an all-white basketball team here. This was a chance to integrate these guys and have them recognized for something that they all went through together and they did together. So it was just a great moment overall, and something that I thought was worthy of promoting that night. So some of the delivery barriers with Coaching Boys into Men. So some of the things I talked about when I implemented during the season that I didn't really account for, and now I would, and so that's why I'm passing along this, this torch of advice to you guys, is I didn't think about the holidays. Obviously basketball season's in the winter, and right away, we had that 2-week break with the Christmas, with the Christmas season and New Year's and everything, and it happened to, Mondays were off. We were done Mondays. I tried Monday morning. I think we had a practice Monday morning at 9 in the morning, and these boys hadn't been in school yet, and they were just dragging themselves out of bed, and like the contributions that day, that conversation didn't go well, and I told myself and the coach, I'll never do that again. I will never have a conversation with these guys on an off day unless it's in the afternoon. Like we did it at 9 a.m. right before our meeting, and it just didn't work well. So, holidays got to be considered, especially if they interfere with your routine, like Coaching Boys into Men Mondays. Snow days, we had one of those. It pumped me off of my track a little bit. Scheduling changes. This is more so to do with like baseball, rainouts and things like that. Maybe football, or soccer, things that may be impacted by inclement weather or whatnot. And like I mentioned, losing matters. Team morale is impacted. I'm calling out guys and correcting their on-court issues. And so it really was hard to ask them to be vulnerable in these conversations. So you got to find a way. You got to be, creative. And that's what I talked about. I took advantage. I fell behind 1 or 2 weeks, and I took advantage of the win streak because team morale was high then. Not saying it can't be done, but I'm sitting here telling these guys, that I didn't approve of the behavior or the way they reacted to a call with a referee. And then I'm saying, hey, how are you going to react with a naked girl in your bed? It's kind of difficult to get them to respond. So I found a way to be creative and a way to get through it, and that's going to depend on each and every individual sport team and athletic program. Off season, at least at the high school level, you have these multi-sport athletes. So if you try to do it in high school, there's really no way you can do it during the off season, because my guys. Not only were they not really good at basketball this year, but then they also think they can play football and baseball for some reason. I'm not sure why, but they do. And so you really can't take advantage of the off season with guys that play more than one sport. And then you're talking about summers and being off of school or being, away at home. Even in college, guys go back home for a short period of time. So, off season in the summers isn't going to work. At the high school level, you can't make it mandatory. I've been reminded that a million times, and I'm just like, well, that's a portion of the reason why we're not very good, because we're not making guys come practice. Like, the good teams in our section are the teams that built these programs that their guys are involved year-round. And, there are different opinions about that, but if you want to get in the game, you're going to have to get on board with what these guys are doing, and we can't make it mandatory. So you're going to have guys not showing up. And the athlete's commitment is just different during the off season. At least at the high school level, you can use at the collegiate level, guys. I'm drawing a blank right now, but you can use at the collegiate level whatever to get those guys to buy in and be on board. But are you a coach in the building during the off season? That's another one. I'm not employed by the school district. I'm only there during the course of the season. I'm not a teacher in the school building, so it can make it difficult to implement during the off season. I'm going to take a quick water.
Jerry, while you take a water break, I did have another question come up.
Sure.
The question that I had was, it says, what is the foundation or platform the program has as its basis or creation, and does the school system or state need sign-off before implementing?
Okay. You want to can you repeat that one more time, please?
Yeah, I think the question is, does the school system or state need sign-off from anybody before implementing the program?
No. Through my experience, what I've learned, that's going to be specific or dependent upon each individual school district. No state sign-off. With my high school, crazy enough, I had to go in front of the school board because that's what they wanted to do. And I had to tell the school board everything about it. And the superintendent was on board immediately. But there were, if you don't have the athletic director's support right away, or if there's somebody, some authoritative figure that is questioning it and says they want you to get approval from the school board, then you may. But then, just recently I just made 3 agreements with 3 large high school districts in the surrounding area of Pittsburgh here, and each one of their ADs signed off on it. I didn't have to go in front of the school board. So it's just going to be dependent. It's going to be a case-by-case situation. And I think more so if you're looking to host those pre- and post-surveys with high school students, that's when you get into, people wanting, more permission from higher-ups and things like that. So, no, not necessarily. It's just going to be dependent upon each educational institution.
Yeah, it seems like athletic directors would need to be the ones to kind of sign off from the school perspective, but also just to be clear, coaching boys into men doesn't have to sign off on the use of the program, right?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all.
I mean, out of courtesy, we would like to know who's implementing, and we're going to talk about that at the end, but yeah, you guys don't have to sign off that way. And then I did just get another question. Are there separate cards for the for the college model. This person says they've got the high school model, and I know the answer to that is yes. So I guess that's a good segue, right?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I mean, like I said, I mentioned here at PAR, we created the college version. So in order to get that college version, you have to go through me, and we place an order, and we can make that happen. That's no problem. Trying to think where I left off here. So yeah, so in season, off season, there are barriers. This is the stuff that I again learned through my experience, worth mentioning to you guys as you look to implement or set up strategies to implement. And I thought about the collegiate thing. At the collegiate level, you can get guys that come during the off season because you can leverage those scholarships and things like that, but you don't have that at the high school level. And just some additional thoughts. You can always bring it back as far as like character development and backbone of the program. Like you can always bring coaching boys and the men back to the standard of the team. That's the conversations that I had with my guys. This is what we do, coaching boys into men. It's another leverage and support to hold athletes accountable and to establish more foundation about what your program's all about. It also, provide to scale it down to the guys by using personal examples. This is a thing that we've talked about time and time again. Just making yourself more relatable and making yourself more believable, and in fact, that allows the guys to trust the conversations and contribute a little bit more. And this also, reflecting back, I realized that what this did as far as, the opportunity for most athletes or our guys, these conversations, we learned together and we learned about our mistakes, and we talked about the mistakes, and guys talked about their own mistakes and how they could approach those things a little bit differently. As far as the fear of lack of participation by players, I mentioned it before. Don't be afraid to sit in silence, and be uncomfortable for a little bit or be vulnerable for a little bit. I mean, that is important to know. So again, we were talking about I got ahead of myself there a little bit, but again, this is going to help you establish the backbone of your program. This is that foundation piece right there of what we stand for. This gives players another opportunity to be positive influences in the program, but in a different way. So not all your leaders have to be the guys that score the most points or play the most minutes or throw the most touchdowns, kick the most field goals, whatever it may be, or kick the most goals in the net. This is a chance for leadership development in many ways. Just to kind of mention my personal experience, I talk about a couple of guys I had problems with. We had some behavior issues, and we tried to stick with these guys. We try to give these guys a chance. They're constantly making mistakes on the court, off the court, with teachers, with the referees, even giving disrespect to the head coach and things like that. And so it was surprising to see that those 2 or 3 guys that were your typical problem guys, these are the guys that actually were the biggest contributors in these conversations, reflecting back. These were the guys that had some of the best things to say. They were the most consistent voices in the rooms. So I think it's just worth mentioning that. Like, this gives guys another opportunity to be positive impacts on the program, because these guys were the guys that were, setting bad tones sometimes up on the court, but down in and I recognize that. I made sure I mentioned that to the guys in front of all the other guys. I always thank them for their contributions. Make sure you're always thanking these guys for their contributions, because it's important to keep the heartbeat going. And I can remember at least 4 or 5 opportunities during the course of the season where I was able to call out some behaviors that weren't congruent to the CBIM message. One time, I don't know how we did it, but we won against a community rival, next door community. Big rivalry. I don't know why, because we don't win games, but for some reason, our guys get up against these guys, and we beat this team at their home gym. So we had a big away win, and we're getting down into the locker room, and these guys already pull out their cell phones, and I know exactly what they're doing. They're taking pictures in the away locker room, in the visiting locker room, and they're ready to go post this on social media. And right away, I said, coaching boys into men, like, we've already had this discussion around our responsibility to social media and how we handle ourselves respectfully in other people's places and on the internet. And so it was just a good time to call it out. It happened so many times, but that was just one of the specific examples I wanted to give. So, coaches are being asked or expected to address these issues and keep their athletes out of trouble, and this is just that leverage right there, this extra leverage that Coaching Boys into Men provides. So, you've gone through these webinars. You'll have my email and phone number. Again, you have Casey, all her contact information. We're here to help as you learn and implement the program. I can't suggest enough. Read the information up front that is given in those packets. It's an easy read. Ask questions and stay on the course. But, stay in contact with Casey as you're implementing. And remember, the first year of the program, it's kind of training itself. You got to get thrown to the wolves a little bit. It's like anything else. It's your first year of teaching. It's your first year of teaching a course, or it's your first year of coaching. It's first year coaching the program. You're learning a little bit about it. Stay a little bit ahead of the guys. Stay a little bit, make sure you're preparing a little bit for the conversations and, asking questions when necessary. And I think that the implementation will go well. So any other questions really out there, Casey, as I move on?
Yeah, we did have a question about whether or not you provide pre or post test surveys.
No, that comes with the curriculum. So that would also come with the resource packet. Yeah, that's accessible, and that would be up to you guys to determine whether or not each individual, educational institution, their athletic programs want to do that.
Yeah.
So we can get that. Yeah, it's very accessible.
Okay, and we at the Coalition would certainly be willing to help people implement the pre and post too.
Great. So this is kind of the last portion. It's going to be sort of like the card breakdown, and I do this a couple of different ways in my trainings. Obviously, training the cards, training the audience for on the cards via a webinar or technology is going to look a little different. But I usually do some. I like to host a card myself. I'll do a card. I'll ask if anybody wants to come up and do a card themselves. So we do a little role playing and things like that. I break down the groups into like pairs. Actually, I'll have them pair up, and I provide them with a card each, and they both kind of look over the cards, and then they talk to each other about what the card is about and what they like about the card and what they may not like about the card and what they think might happen, what kind of conversations might arise. So I do that when I'm at a live audience. So I had to think of a different way to kind of train, and I'm putting that in parentheses, kind of like you guys on the cards via a webinar. So I broke the cards down into categories. So it's worth mentioning, especially when you're implementing during the season, these cards do run in correspondence to the course of the season. It starts out with your respect conversation in card 1, 2, and 3. You have your respect conversation, you have your responsibility conversation, you have your expectations conversation, and you have that general rules conversation about how the program, how this program works, and if you want to be a part of this program, this is what you're going to have to do, and these are the rules and so it goes really well with those conversations early on in the season, and that's what card 1, 2, and 3 is all about. It progresses nicely with the season. It sets the stage and the tone for the rest of the discussions, and it also starts off slow. Respect, responsibility, expectation. None of those conversations are around women, sexual assault or violence, or anything around the respectful treatment of others. All it is about is the expectations conversation. So it sets up nicely. It builds some momentum. It gets guys comfortable in the conversation setting, and it allows you to start building some ahead of steam before you move into card 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and where the content is more around respectful treatment of others, and a really strong focus on the respectful treatment of women and girls. It has your conversations around your responsibility to social media, and bragging about your sexual reputation, your sexual conquest, consent. No means no, yes means yes. All those conversations are in this card group 4 through 9. And then card 10, 11, and 12, these are where we give the guys an opportunity to apply some of the stuff we've been talking about. Some scenarios are presented, and the conversations are around modeling respect and communicating boundaries, and conversations around how you can intervene in certain scenarios. So some stuff about, being a more active participant as far as when situations are going on, How can you be an active bystander? And then that last card is the pledge card. And again, it's how do we influence others? We pick athletes as well because we realize, athletes are leaders on campuses. Athletes are leaders at our high schools. So they have some influence on their peers, and they have some influence on their community. So how can we make an influence on the bigger picture, on the community? And so we talk about that pledge card number 12. So I'm going to look at each one of them individually and kind of, I'll try to stick to this script. I probably won't, but kind of my lessons learned again. Going back over those conversations with the evaluator, thinking back and all the notes I took about my experience for each card, reflecting back on that stuff. I set it up so that I could show you guys, like maybe give you a tip or an example about that card, and then one thing maybe that worked or didn't work with that card, and then maybe a story or a quote from one of the athletes. So I'm going to try to do that for each card to kind of give you an idea of how those conversations went. More I'll go through quickly, and then maybe, if there was a really good conversation, it might take me a little longer to get through that card. But, I talked about it, the preseason speech. This is your upfront conversation. This is setting the tone for the, for the season as far as, what Coaching Boys and the Men is all about. And, definitely there was some hesitation for this first one. They were kind of like suspicious at this point, But this is a good topic to start with because guys were able to communicate what respect means to them. That's all I said. What does it mean to you guys? And they were able to communicate what respect means to them and define respect. And then I took it off of script a little bit. And I said, and this will be my tip for you guys, take it off script a little bit. How do you show your family respect? How do you show your mother respect? Give me an example of how you show your teacher respect on a daily basis. Or how can we respect each other as teammates? And then I move into, more specifically, how do you show respect to women in your lives and to girls in your lives? And so, good conversation, good upfront piece, not too difficult, and it gives the guys a chance to kind of see the direction the program is headed. 15, 20 minutes on a Monday, fast forward to next Monday, and Coaching Boys and the Men Monday, the second conversation a week later, and now you have your responsibility expectations conversation. And I kind of just same thing with this card as the first card. I just substituted the word responsibility for respect. And my tips to coaches, this was a great opportunity to tie in your program expectations with this conversation. We were able to gauge where the guys were on this topic, and again, it gave them something they were familiar to talk about. They felt comfortable talking about this because they know what the team rules are. They know what the team expectations are. They're able to communicate that stuff. So, I made sure that was part of the conversation. And then we talked about how do we hold each other accountable as teammates. And, at this point, we were building a little bit of momentum as far as our Coaching Boys and Men Mondays were concerned. Then it moves into insulting language, card 3. And again, like I said, I think I showed you, each card looks different, not a ton on here. This is, you can be very frank and to the point. I told the guys, and this is a tip as far as relating to your guys. I told my guys at this conversation, Coach McMeekin can be passionate, and at times I can be colorful. I can use some colorful language, and I try not to, especially with high school. But I came from coaching college, where that is a little bit more accepted, and so I had to learn how to adapt into the high school ranks. But I never used language that demeaned a gender or someone's sexuality or women. And so I issued a challenge to the guys during this card. I challenged the guys to not use words that demean women or gender or sexuality for the entire season. And I challenged them to do it on and off the court when the coaches were present in the players and during the players' day and when they were not. And I knew that was going to be tough. These guys throw around words all the time. But I was most important. I wanted them to eliminate, the word bitch or fag or whatever that was that, they throw around so loosely. I wanted to make sure they weren't using those words to describe somebody. And then we talked about what it meant if you called a guy a bitch. What does that mean? How does that show disrespect towards women? And how if we're telling a guy he's playing like a bitch or even a girl, how are we how does that reflect on women? And they talked about it, kind of we worked through it, and it's like, we're kind of saying, we're insinuating that women are inferior to men, and we had that conversation. And so it was just a great conversation. And then actually, what's worth mentioning, that day after we went up onto the court, probably within 25 minutes, you know, we do some competitive stuff up front. Guys are competing against each other in, you know, whatever drill we were doing. And the one team, guys got, you know, angry with each other, pissed off at each other because they were losing. And the one guy actually called the guy fag. And another guy, we all heard it, and the guy said, another one of our guys policed it. He said, come on, man, are you serious? Coach just had a 20-minute conversation around insulting language. And that kid that he said that to, that said that word, looked at me and was like, Coach, I'm sorry, it won't happen again. I didn't have to do a thing. I didn't have to do one thing. I didn't have to say anything. I said, I got you, and we moved on from it. But it was policing itself 20 minutes after we had that conversation. Now we move into, you know, 4 through 9, again, some of the heavier content stuff directed towards the respectful treatment of others. And, you know, this is an opportunity right when you move in here, if you want to establish some comfortability, so you want to be comfortable, and why not use a current event right here? That would be my, you know, tip. And, I mean, you have anything from the NFL, the NBA, NCAA, you have a ton of different stories, you know, and I just ask guys, you know, what are you guys seeing on television around, you know, athletes that are making poor decisions with women? And they started to contribute. They all started to name players that are in the news. NFL guys, NBA guys, NCAA, they named them all. They named Steubenville. They were able to just talk about different schools that were being highlighted, so they knew. They are aware. This just gave them an opportunity, again, up front, to feel comfortable and answer questions like they were, you know, like they were doing it right or whatever. I just did it to start getting the conversations going, and then I moved into, you know, so what are some examples of disrespectful behaviors toward women and girls? Or what do you see some of your friends doing that are disrespectful behaviors toward women and girls? Why is it not cool to, you know, catcall? You know, why is it not cool to call out a girl for what she's wearing? And, you know, they did a decent job. You know, some of the things that they mentioned, you know, we talked about when we talked about, you know, the catcalling thing, like why shouldn't we be doing that? Or why do guys do that? You know, they said they do it to show off in front of their friends. Or they might also do it because the person really does like that girl but doesn't know how to really approach her. And so we talked about, okay, how can you approach a girl without, you know, catcalling or showing off in front of your friends? And then I always had a guy that I could count on. He was a 10th grader, had a rough upbringing, 5 stepsisters he's adopted, and he's ahead of his time. I could always count on him. You know, you start recognizing who your guys are, who your immature guys are. You need those contributions for the conversation, and then you need your mature guys. You need those guys for contribution as well. And so, you know, I said, like, you know, how can we approach a girl that we like? What's something? How can we, you know, if we don't know her? And I could always count on him to have some good advice. And, you know, he said something like, you know, maybe just walk up, ask her name, how she's doing, tell her maybe give her a compliment, and see where it goes from there. Perfect. That's all we need. And so that's kind of the way the conversation went. Digital disrespect. I don't really like the name of this card. I've suggested that we rename this, but really what falls into place here, or what the discussion is all about, is the guy's responsibility to social media, to technology, to their cell phones, all that different conversation. And the first thing I let them know, again, tip, is to relate to them and say, hey, I'm not even going to begin to say that, you know, I'm familiar with all this. You guys are growing up in a different era. I didn't have all these social media opportunities. I didn't have, you know, the internet at my fingertips on my cell phone when I was in high school. You know, yeah, we had maybe computers in school and internet on the computers at home and things like that, but we didn't have all this. We didn't have these luxuries, or I don't even look at them as luxuries. I didn't have these, you know, these options when I was growing up. So I can't begin to think that I'm an expert or have all the right answers, but let's start addressing some of those things. So being relatable right there was key. But I had to clear the air. There was definitely an elephant in the room that day for us when we had this conversation, and I was kind of hesitant. For those of you that were on my first webinar, you'd probably be familiar with the story. But you know, again, just to kind of give you a little bit of background information, my first year when I took on this, I just finished my second year of coaching at this school. And after our first season, we had a guy get into some trouble, one of our seniors, and he made some of these mistakes. And he captured her. He was having sex with a girl. She was, I think, 15. He was 18. That's okay in the state of Pennsylvania, but it's not okay to capture it on your phone. So he was in possession of child pornography. And then he gave it to he passed it along to his friends. He was showing his friends stuff like that. So now he just distributed child pornography. He was charged with all that stuff eventually, and eventually he took his own life. And all of my guys that you saw in those pictures, they all know him. So we dealt with a suicide. And it was just crazy. I was just becoming acclimated with all this information, learning how to talk about this stuff. And then this incident happened, and this tragic incident happened. And I was like, wow, the mistakes that came out of all this are specifically addressed in these cards. All the mistakes that one of my young guys made were specifically addressed in these cards. And I can't help but feel that had I got this job a year before, or had I been prepared to implement this program with that young man that took his own life, the first year that I took on this program, I probably could have saved his life. I really, truly believe that his life could have been saved. I actually just had a conversation. So we're doing work with middle schools as well. We're piloting the middle school program, coaching boys in the men middle school here in Allegheny County. And I work with a bunch of middle schools in the Pittsburgh public school system. They're doing the program right now as part of the research study to gain legs and to learn about it. And they're reporting back to me, the spring sports are reporting back to me how the implementation process went with their middle school sport team. And one of the guys was telling me that he got to this card and that one of his kids stood up and said, most of you guys know I got in trouble for this. I took naked pictures of myself, and I didn't know that I shouldn't be doing this stuff. This is a middle school student, 8th grader or 7th grader. And he stood up and acknowledged that he made this mistake in front of his guys and told the coach that he doesn't believe he would have done this had he had this conversation before he took those pictures and passed those pictures on. So I really believe it carries a strong message. And, there were so many great conversations. This was one of those conversations that absolutely took more than 15 minutes, and I wasn't willing or ready to end it on 15 minutes, and I think we ended up talking for about a half an hour. And I will tell you, I was pleasantly surprised that it went really well. I was kind of hesitant to talk about because it was the first time I talked about it with the group of guys about the suicide. I was nervous of how that would make guys feel. Would it bring up emotions? Would these guys, we had to go up and practice, and I had to pick the right day. I didn't want it to be a practice before a game, so I kind of specifically picked this to happen 2 days before, so we had 2 practices before a game because I didn't want this. I didn't know how the guys were going to react, but actually, pleasantly, they were all fine. They were all great. I said, if anybody needs to take a moment before practice, no, we're good, we're okay. And it was just, it was a great conversation.
Hey, Jerry, I just want to give us a time check. We're at 11:38 right now, so just giving you a little heads up there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We're actually at 12:38 here on the East Coast.
Sorry.
I don't get any laughter out of my jokes on online. I'm a bad joke teller. So, understanding consent, card 6. And again, for this one, a lot of coaches have up front thought that this would be a tough card. Again, I could just tell you, just go for it. It doesn't turn out to be difficult. You think you don't know how to talk about consent. You think you might run into something you're not going to know how to answer. You think you might. It's not true. If you do run into something to answer, you admit it, and you move on. You say, yeah, I'm not quite sure. We should figure that out, and you move on. But I don't even believe that's going to occur. But just preparing a little bit, having an idea of where you want to go with the conversation. Think of a decent warm-up. This is where I introduced the Dave Chappelle consent clip. You can access that. It's Dave Chappelle consent clip. It's sort of humorous like that Amy Schumer video I showed you earlier. It's a humorous way to introduce consent. And so I would actually advise you to use the Dave Chappelle as your warm-up if you can, if you have access to the, if you have your film room or whatever you're in there, you can show it. It worked out really well. The guys chuckled, but they got it, they understood it, and we were able to host a conversation afterwards. Yeah, don't be afraid for a little bit of silence during this card. Here's what happened specifically in this card. Like I said, you always had that one guy that was the immature guy. But great for these conversations. You need those guys. You need to have that guy that's going to say what everybody else is thinking, even though it's probably wrong. And I could always count on my guy. And so I also told you, hey, if I'm going to feel uncomfortable a little bit, I'm going to make you feel uncomfortable. You won't see this question in the Ask the Players, but I'm like, and it just came to me while I was sitting there. And I thought to myself, forget it, I'm going for it. And so I said, okay, let me ask you a question and see how you guys want to answer this. You know, let's say one of you guys happen to get lucky and find yourselves naked in the bed with a female, and it's going the direction that you think it's going to head, but then all of a sudden she says, no, I don't want to do this. How do you move on? What do you do next? She says no, she wants to stop. And then my guy, of course, you know, the immature guy goes, you know, coach. And I'm like, no, I don't know. Please elaborate. Tell me exactly how you would handle that situation. And he goes, I'd probably say, you know, come on, baby, I love you. And then see what she does from there. And like all the guys laughed, and it was perfect it was a perfect contribution for the conversation because I could now address it, and then we could talk about a way that we really should handle it. And I said, listen, what you heard there was no. You heard stop. What we need to know is when we hear no and we hear stop, it's over. All bets are off. End of discussion. She said no. She doesn't feel comfortable. She doesn't want to go that way for whatever reason. There's no debating it. There's no manipulating it. There's no coercing it. It's time to move on. So how can we move on? And then my kid that I told you was ahead of his time was like, maybe respect her wishes. You know, maybe say all right and get her clothes and say, hey, you want to get something to eat? And I said, perfect. That sounds great. And then can you imagine maybe the next time might be the actual time if you both are communicating that, and she's going to respect the fact that you respected her. So we had that conversation worth mentioning. Bragging about your sexual reputation. Again, this is a card that specifically addresses some of the mistakes that, you know, my former player that took his own life. We had a conversation around that a little bit. You know, I use a personal example of the way some of our conversations went in my college basketball locker room. And we talked about ways we could stop that type of conversation from happening when it happens with our own team. And guys admitted it happens and it comes up in the locker room. And we came up with some good ideas on how to address that, you know, with each other. And so we also talked about we talked about why guys don't speak up. And this conversation, you know, just went really, really well. Okay, when aggression crosses the line, there are many. Again, this is a great tip. You know, bringing current events again right here. There are many times that this comes up during the season as well. You know, we had guys that cross the line all the time, off and on the court, getting mad at each other, getting mad with the referees. So we use a lot of those as teachable moments, teachable points. And the program actually talks about in your booklets how to address teachable moments. So that's what we did. We had guys that would disrespect referees, coaches. We had guys that got into. We had a guy that got into it with fans. These are the same two guys. Ask me why they made it as long as they did. I don't know. However, participation is so low, and then you know at the high school level, parent involvement is so high that you really got to watch the decisions that you make. And we really try to work with these guys. You know, we didn't have a lot of guys come out for the team. It's kind of you get what you know. What you see is what you get. And so, you know, we dealt with that throughout the season. But it was a chance to address that in this card, some of the behaviors. And then this is a great one, I'm sorry, to really bring in the current events. You know, you had the whole Ray Rice thing, obviously, many different options there. We had a detailed conversation about what they knew about the whole Ray Rice incident, and it gave a good segue to getting started to talking about this stuff. We actually had a couple of guys disclose about some personal issues, home life instances, and they were guys, and they were the guys you would guess. You know, guys talking about some of the things they experienced at home. I can't see my picture. Do you see my picture?
I don't.
Casey?
No, I
What
don't.
happened there?
I'm not sure.
Are there any questions?
No, not.
I try to.
Yeah, if anybody's got any, let me have them. Well, he gets his PowerPoint back.
I apologize. For some reason, I think my battery was detached. There it goes. It's back on. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
But yeah, that personal responsibility one allowed us to tie in a lot of the things that were going on in the season. What is it doing this? And then I only had 2 more cards, so I'm just going to run through them on the last ones. The 10th card was your communicating boundaries. And so, I posed a couple of my own questions. Who in here has a relationship? A couple of guys talked about their girlfriends, and then I asked them to talk about how they show their girlfriends respect and how they communicate boundaries with their girlfriends. Another point worth mentioning, when you are talking about, people's sexuality or relationships and things like that, I first started using the word girlfriend when I would say, talk about relationships, but I felt like I was eliminating somebody from the discussion as far as their sexuality. I didn't want to assume anybody's sexuality, and I addressed that in the locker room as well. We can't assume, everyone's sexuality, and we don't cast judgment on any of that, but I'm going to use the word partner from here, and so that's what I did. I moved on and used the word partner. And then the last one was modeling respect and promoting equality. And, the guys at this point were on point with everything. They had, good answers and great feedback for this card. They kind of were able to generate good suggestions as far as how to model it in the school, how to model it throughout the community. At least they're saying this stuff. Do I believe it's all going on? Probably not. But I do believe that they're listening and they're talking about it. And, actually this was our last in-session conversation. And so when the conversation was over, a couple of those guys, my behavioral guys, come up to me and actually personally thanked me and said, what you did in this room this year was, I really appreciate it. These were great talks, and they weren't told to do that. They both came up to me and thanked me. I thought it was a pretty nice moment. The last card, again, is the pledge card. I'm so sorry that my I don't know what happened here, but good thing it's the end. But this is the pledge. This is what the pledge says. The pledge says, this season you've all been great athletes and team players. I've also been impressed with your leadership in showing respect for others. You guys are becoming great players in the game and are turning out to be great men in life. I respect each of you for treating women and girls with respect. In recognition of the commitment you've all made, I want us to sign this pledge together. And that's that moment that I had at half court with the other basketball team, and we had that whole pledge board. I decided to do it that way. You could talk to Casey when it comes to that moment. You could talk to me. It could be something as simple as coming back into that locker room for the pledge that day, or wrapping it up on the 11th card and then going through the pledge. Everybody put their hands in the middle and say, we're going to pledge to take on this mission and, end the huddle with pledge. We pledge to do this, or whatever. It can look as simple as that, or we could talk about. And there is a pledge card in your curriculum there that talks about the different ways you can host a pledge and the different things you can do. So that's kind of it. Actually, I'd like to mention during that pledge moment, that halftime ceremony that we did at our last game, which was senior night, and all those people in the crowd from the community, and then you had the visiting team there and everything. At the end, we had like a senior dinner where we get refreshments and things like that in the cafeteria after the game was over and the guys get showered up. And while we were waiting for the guys, a bunch of the parents came up to me and thanked me. It was the first time I got any feedback from the parents about this program. I didn't know what they knew about the program yet, other than I had just given that halftime recognition speech to it. And I say at least 5 different parents came up, thanked me, and some of the comments that I received were that, that their guys came home and talked to them about this stuff, told them what we were talking about. When they were watching television together or something like that, or driving in the car and passing so my agency has a ton of bulletin boards up here about consent and stuff like that. And then you have your national campaigns going on national television and on billboards and stuff like that. The guys would say, hey, that's what Coach talks about, the No More campaign, or the It's On Us campaign, or the billboards around here. Hey, that's what Coach talks to about. Oh, that's his agency. Or they started to see it and recognize it, and that's more than they ever acknowledged. So I just wanted to mention that's kind of what this program does is really just puts these guys on alert, nonetheless. So I'll leave it at that. Open up for questions. Again, I apologize. I don't know why the I don't know what's going on here with my computer, but thank goodness it's the end of my spiel. What do you think, Casey? Are you still there, Casey?
Yes. So it looks like I don't have any current questions right now. I'm just double checking. But as we move forward, I know you mentioned the kits a couple of times, and we had some questions about kits. If you need kits, I still have a couple here. We may be able to purchase a few. If you're wanting to have one for all of your coaches, then you may need to purchase the cards themselves. But Jerry, I can help you with that. Kind of connecting to Jerry in order to do that. I do have a recording of today's webinar. We are recording this. So if you have other people from your school that or other coaches that you wanted to make sure actually had a chance to sit through the webinar, I'll be sending out a follow-up link to the recording so that you'll have that. And also, Jerry and I have talked about putting together a statewide call in the next month or so where we can pull in people who are actually, getting ready to implement and see after today and after you've thought about this a little bit more, what questions do you have? What obstacles do you see? And how can we help support you through that process? So that is kind of what we have in terms of next steps. Did I miss anything, Jerry?
No, I think we covered pretty much everything.
So
I thank you for putting this together, and I thank everybody for being out there online and attending. I hope I addressed everything, and I don't know if there's any last minute questions, but yeah, no, I think we nailed it all.
Great. And of course, feel free to reach out to me afterwards, all of you, if you have questions that you think of after the event. I will try and help you, or I will pull Jerry in and get answers for you. So we're really excited about this program and excited to be able to offer it to our schools here in Tennessee. So thank you guys.
Casey.
Yes.
Casey.
Yes.
I'm just gonna. My last slide had our numbers and our emails up on the screen. I'm just gonna say it to the audience so that they can have my contact information. My contact information is Jerry M, so it's JERRYM @ PAAR.net. JERRYM @ PAAR.net. And my office phone number is 412-431-5665, extension 115. 412-431-5665. Extension 115. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Let me double check my question box. Nope, we are good. All right, everybody. We are getting ready to sign off. Thank you so much for being on the call. And if Jerry, if you want to stay on, or I'll give you a call in just a minute.
Yeah, call my office. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.